The first time my family called Amanda my girlfriend, it didn't feel like a lie. It felt like a door clicking shut behind me.
This is so nice.
We were standing in my parents' foyer in suburban Connecticut, shaking snow off our boots, the air smelling like pine cleaner and cinnamon candles. My mom beamed like she'd solved a puzzle she'd been pretending not to see for years. My dad did that careful, polite nod he saves for topics he refuses to name out loud. And Amanda, my best friend since college, my safest person, my constant, smiled like it cost her something. The plan was simple. 3 days for the wedding weekend, 1 shared guest room, matching outfits, hand-holding when needed, a few believable details, how we met, how long we'd been together, why I'd never brought her home before. I told myself I was doing it to make things easier, to stop the questions, to finally show up to a family event without feeling like an unfinished sentence. Amanda agreed, because she always agrees to me, because she's loyal in a way that makes me both grateful and ashamed. But the first night, after rehearsal dinner photos and too many toasts, my cousin cornered us by the kitchen island and said, "Kiss her," like it was a joke, like it was entertainment, like love was something you performed to be believed. I laughed too loudly. Amanda's hand found the small of my back, steady, warm, familiar, and she leaned in just enough to make the room tilt. Her eyes didn't look playful. They looked serious, almost tender, almost hurt. We escaped upstairs after, breathless from pretending it didn't matter. In our room, the heating vent rattled and the window pane shivered with wind. Amanda stood by the dresser, unpinning her hair, her shoulders tense beneath the soft fabric of her dress. I started to apologize about my family, about the questions, about the stupid dare, when she turned toward me and said quietly, "Emma, we can stop." Her voice wasn't angry, it was careful, like she was protecting something fragile, like she was protecting me from herself. Then I stepped closer, too close, and she didn't move away. I don't know who leaned in first. I only know that the kiss wasn't in the plan, and the second it happened, my body recognized a truth my mind had been dodging for years. If this story already pulled something loose inside you, make sure to subscribe to the channel. And tell me in the comments, would you ever pretend to love someone and risk discovering it was real? I've known Amanda long enough to recognize when she's bracing herself. It's subtle. Her shoulders square, her jaw tightens just a fraction, and her voice gets softer instead of louder. She did all of that the moment we crossed the state line into Connecticut. Snow blurred the edges of the highway, gray and quiet, and the car smelled faintly like coffee and the lavender hand cream she always used. I told myself the tension was about my family. I didn't let myself consider that it might be about me. We met in college, during a semester when neither of us felt particularly anchored. I was the careful one even back then. Organized, polite, emotionally restrained. Amanda was the opposite, observant, dryly funny, deeply present. We became friends the way people do when they stop trying to impress each other. Late-night takeout, shared notes, long walks where silence felt like permission instead of absence. Somewhere along the way, she became the person I called first, the person who knew when I was lying by omission, the person I trusted without ever defining what that trust meant. The idea to pretend we were dating came out of exhaustion, not strategy. My sister's wedding had reopened every familiar wound. Questions about my phase, polite avoidance, that quiet assumption that I was still waiting to become something else. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want to explain. I wanted one weekend where I didn't feel like a problem to be solved. Amanda listened, elbows on the table, eyes steady on mine. She didn't hesitate when she said yes. That should have warned me. My parents' house looked exactly the same as it always had. White siding, trimmed hedges, lights glowing warmly against the cold, familiar in a way that tightened my chest. The moment we stepped inside, my mom's smile froze, recalibrated, then softened into something carefully enthusiastic. "So this is Amanda," she said, already reaching for conclusions. I didn't correct her. Amanda shook her hand, warm and confident, and said, "It's really nice to finally meet you." The word finally landed heavier than it should have. Dinner was polite, too polite. My dad asked Amanda about her job, her city, her plans. the questions measured and respectful in a way they'd never been with my past partners. I watched Amanda answer with ease, her hand resting lightly against my knee under the table. Not gripping, not possessive, just there. My body reacted before my mind did, a quiet awareness I refused to name. I told myself it was nerves. I told myself it meant nothing. Upstairs, the guest room had one bed, neatly made with floral sheets and too many pillows. I'd known that would be the case. I'd even joked about it earlier, tried to make it feel casual. Now, standing there with our coats still on, it felt charged. Amanda set her bag down slowly. "We can ask for another room," she said. Her voice was neutral, offering an out. I shook my head too quickly. "It's fine," I said. "We're adults." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. The rehearsal dinner the next night was louder, looser. Wine flowed. Laughter echoed off polished wood. I played my role, smiling, leaning in, letting Amanda's arm circle my waist when someone was watching. It wasn't difficult. That was the unsettling part. She fit beside me like she always had, like she belonged there. When my cousin made the comment, half joking, half demanding, I felt the room tilt. I laughed. Amanda didn't. She looked at me, searching, giving me time to stop it. I didn't. The kiss itself was brief, controlled, technically perfect, but it cracked something open in me anyway. Not because it was dramatic, but because it felt familiar, because my body didn't flinch or freeze or question. It simply recognized. Amanda pulled back first. Her expression closed off with practiced precision. The room applauded, satisfied. I felt hollow. Later, alone again. The silence pressed in. Amanda stood by the window, watching snow fall in clean, relentless lines. "We should reset some boundaries," she said carefully. I nodded, relief and disappointment colliding in my chest. I told myself she was right. I told myself this would stay simple. But as I lay awake beside her that night, listening to her breathing steady in the dark, one thought refused to leave me alone. I had asked my best friend to pretend. I hadn't asked myself why it felt so real. The morning after the rehearsal dinner arrived quietly, wrapped in pale winter light. Snow had stopped overnight, leaving the world outside my parents' house softened and still, like a scene paused mid-breath. I woke before Amanda and lay there listening to the familiar cadence of her breathing. It was steady, unguarded. I'd shared hotel rooms with her before, couches, even tents on a disastrous camping trip years ago. But this felt different, not because of the bed, because of what we were pretending to be in it. When she finally stirred, she didn't look at me right away. She stretched, careful not to touch, then slipped out of bed with a practiced neutrality that felt deliberate. "I'm going to shower," she said. Her voice was normal. Too normal. The bathroom door closed softly behind her, and I stared at the ceiling, trying to convince myself that the tightness in my chest was leftover adrenaline, that it would pass. Downstairs, my mom was already bustling, music low, coffee strong. She greeted Amanda with an ease that startled me, asked how she slept, offered her favorite mug, commented on how well we fit. The words landed gently, but they stayed. I watched Amanda smile politely, nodding, playing her role with the same grace she always had. My dad joined us, reading the paper, glancing up, only to ask Amanda about her family this time. Not me. Her. I felt a strange mix of relief and displacement. We spent the morning helping with wedding errands, floral pickups, last-minute calls, a stop at the bakery. In public, it was easier. We walked close, our shoulders brushing, our hands occasionally meeting and lingering just long enough to look natural. Every time someone referred to us as a couple, my body responded before my thoughts could catch up. I felt taller, calmer, seen. And that scared me more than the lie itself. At lunch, we sat across from each other at a small cafe near the green. Sunlight streamed through the window, glinting off the silverware. Amanda studied the menu longer than necessary, then looked up and asked, "Are you okay?" I nodded too quickly. "I'm fine," I said, the reflex automatic. She didn't push. She never did. But her eyes searched my face anyway, like she was bracing for impact that hadn't arrived yet. The afternoon dragged. Back at the house, relatives came and went, hugs and small talk blurring together. Amanda became my anchor without trying, offering to refill drinks, stepping in when conversations edged too close to things I wasn't ready to explain. At one point, my aunt squeezed her hand and said, "We're so glad Emma has you." Amanda smiled, thanked her, and looked at me in a way that made my throat close. Later, alone again in the guest room, Amanda sat on the edge of the bed and exhaled slowly. "Your family is kind," she said carefully. "In their way." I laughed, short and humorless. "They're trying," I said. "This is progress." She nodded, but didn't look convinced. "Progress for who?" she asked. The question hung between us, unanswered. That evening we attended a small gathering at a local bar, friends of the bride, familiar faces from my past. The music was loud enough to blur conversation, the air warm and crowded. Someone took a group photo and pulled Amanda in beside me, her arm wrapped around my waist instinctively. It felt natural, too natural. I leaned into her without thinking, and she stiffened just slightly, like she'd crossed an internal line she hadn't meant to. Outside, the cold hit us sharply. We stood under the awning, breaths visible, snow crunching under passing boots. "We should slow down," Amanda said quietly. Not accusing, not dramatic, just honest. "I don't want this to get confusing." I opened my mouth to argue, to reassure her that it was just for the weekend, that we had control. But the words felt hollow before they reached my tongue. Instead, I nodded. "Okay," I said, "you're right." But that night, lying inches apart again, control felt like a concept I'd misunderstood. I stared into the dark, aware of every shift of her weight, every quiet breath. I told myself I could stop this whenever I wanted, that pretending didn't change anything real. Still, when I finally drifted off, the last thought I had was unsettling in its clarity. I wasn't afraid of the lie anymore. I was afraid of what might be true beneath it. By the third day, pretending had stopped feeling like effort. That realization unsettled me more than any awkward question or forced smile. Amanda and I moved through the house with the quiet coordination of people who knew each other's habits, who took longer in the shower, who needed coffee before conversation, who preferred silence in the mornings. None of it was new. What was new was how easily it fit into the shape my family expected from me. The wedding morning arrived wrapped in cold sunlight and nervous energy. My sister's room buzzed with hair dryers, makeup palettes, voices overlapping. Amanda stood slightly apart, hands in her pockets, watching everything with that calm attentiveness that had always grounded me. When my sister noticed her lingering in the doorway, she waved her in. "Stay with Emma," she said casually. "She needs you." The certainty in her voice made my chest ache. We got dressed in the guest room, separate sides of the bed, backs turned out of habit more than intention. I zipped my dress slowly, fumbling at the top. Without asking, Amanda stepped closer and finished it for me. Her fingers brushed my spine, brief and careful. I caught my breath. She stilled. "Sorry," she said quietly. "It's fine," I replied too fast. The lie slid out easily. We both pretended not to notice the tension humming between us. At the ceremony, she sat beside me, our knees touching. Snow drifted down outside the chapel windows, soft and constant. When my sister walked down the aisle, emotion rose unexpectedly in my throat. Amanda reached for my hand without looking. This time, no one was watching us. No one needed convincing. I didn't pull away. I didn't analyze it. I just held on. Afterward, congratulations blurred together. Strangers smiled at us like we made sense. A distant cousin asked how long we'd been together. Amanda answered before I could. Her tone steady, her story seamless. I watched her speak, struck by the ease with which she inhabited this role, by how little it seemed like a role at all. A quiet thought pressed against my ribs, unwanted and insistent. She's good at this because she's been practicing in her head for years. The reception was loud, joyful, overwhelming. Music thumped, glasses clinked, laughter spilled into corners. At some point, Amanda and I found ourselves on the edge of the dance floor, swaying more than dancing. Her hand rested at my waist, my palm flat against her shoulder. It wasn't intimate enough to be scandalous. It wasn't distant enough to be safe. When she leaned in to say something, her breath brushed my ear, and my body responded before my mind could intervene. "I need some air," she murmured. I nodded, grateful for the excuse. Outside, the cold wrapped around us sharply. We stood beneath a string of lights, the snow reflecting their glow. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Amanda stared out at the dark, her expression unreadable. "We should talk about boundaries," she said finally. Her voice was calm, but there was something underneath it, something held back. "This weekend, it's blurring things." I crossed my arms, unsure whether I was bracing against the cold or the conversation. "It doesn't have to mean anything," I said. The words sounded reasonable, safe. Amanda turned to me then, her eyes searching my face with an intensity that made me want to look away. "That's the problem," she replied softly. "It already does. To me." The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. I wanted to fix it, to say something that would smooth the moment over, restore balance. But honesty hovered too close, sharp and risky. "I don't want to lose you," I said instead. It was true. It just wasn't complete. Amanda's mouth curved into a small, sad smile. "I know," she said. "I don't want to lose you either." Back in the room that night, the space between us felt wider than before. Even though the bed hadn't changed, we lay on opposite sides, facing away. The quiet heavy with things unsaid. I stared at the wall, replaying the day in fragments, the way my family looked at us, the ease of Amanda's touch, the ache in her voice when she spoke the truth I hadn't. Sleep came slowly, and when it did, it brought no relief. Because somewhere between pretending and protecting myself, I had crossed a line I didn't know how to uncross. The morning after the wedding felt quieter than it should have. The house had emptied overnight, leaving behind stacked chairs, half-melted candles, and the faint scent of flowers starting to fade. It was the kind of stillness that comes after something important ends. Relief tangled with loss. Amanda and I moved through the space carefully, like we were sharing a fragile truce. The performance was supposed to be over. Somehow it wasn't. My mom suggested we go into town before everyone left. Coffee, a walk, something nice to close the weekend. She said it lightly, but her eyes moved between us with expectation. I almost declined. Instead, I nodded. Amanda glanced at me, a silent question, then agreed. The choice felt harmless. It wasn't. Downtown looked unchanged, brick storefronts, winter light catching on icy sidewalks, the river edged with thin white frost. We walked close, coats brushing. When Amanda reached for my hand, she did it slowly, giving me time to pull away. I didn't. The warmth of her fingers wrapped around mine, steady and familiar. There was no audience, no one to convince. That made it harder to pretend it didn't matter. At the cafe, we sat by the window, steam fogging the glass. The barista smiled at us and asked what we wanted, together. Amanda ordered, then looked at me, waiting. She remembered my usual. That small kindness landed heavier than it should have. I felt seen in a way that had nothing to do with the lie. Conversation stayed light. Work, plans, things we weren't ready to define. When Amanda leaned across the table to brush a bit of foam from my lip, I froze. Her touch lingered for half a second too long. I laughed it off, calling it practice. The word tasted wrong. Amanda's hand dropped immediately, her expression closing just enough for me to notice. Outside again, the cold sharpened everything. We walked toward the river, the sound of ice shifting beneath the surface. Amanda stopped. "Emma," she said, my name careful, and waited. "When this ends, what happens to us?" The question was quiet, direct. I searched for an answer that felt safe. "We go back to normal," I said. The word sounded thin even to me. She nodded once, acceptance without agreement. We ran into an old classmate near the bookstore. She smiled, hugged me, then turned to Amanda with warmth. "I've heard so much about you," she said. "Emma talks about you all the time." I opened my mouth to correct her. Amanda squeezed my hand, grounding me. "It's nice to finally meet you," she said easily. The lie settled deeper, heavier. Back at the house, goodbyes began. My mom hugged Amanda longer than necessary, told her to visit again. My dad nodded, approving in a way that made my chest ache. Amanda thanked them, composed and kind. I watched from the doorway, realizing too late that I didn't want this version of us to end. That night, the guest room felt smaller. Snow tapped softly against the window. Amanda stood by the dresser, arms crossed, holding herself together. "I don't think I can keep doing this," she said quietly. "Being this close to you, and pretending it doesn't mean anything." "I never said it meant nothing," I replied too fast. She laughed once, short, tired. "You don't have to. Your silence says it for you." Something in me gave way, not dramatically, not loudly. I stepped toward her before I could stop myself. She didn't move back. That was all it took. The kiss wasn't planned. It wasn't careful. My mouth found hers like it had been waiting for permission my mind never gave. She froze for half a second, then her hand slid into my hair, pulling me closer with an urgency that knocked the breath from my lungs. It was warm, familiar, terrifying in how right it felt. She kissed me like someone who had already lost this once and wasn't willing to lose it again quietly. When we broke apart, it was only because she pressed her forehead to mine, breathing hard. "We can't," she whispered. Not because she didn't want to, but because she wanted to too much. She stepped back first. Always her. And in that moment, I understood, pretending had ended the second her lips touched mine. And nothing about this would ever feel simple again. Amanda pulled away the next morning like someone who had already decided something difficult in the dark. There was no argument, no tension-filled silence, no dramatic pause, just distance. Polite, efficient distance. She woke early, showered quickly, and dressed with her back to me. When she turned around, her expression was composed in a way that felt deliberate, protective. "I'm going to head out after breakfast," she said, adjusting her jacket. "I told my boss I'd be back earlier." The words landed harder than they should have. We'd planned to leave together. I searched her face for something, hesitation, regret, anything that suggested last night still existed for her the way it did for me. I found nothing. "Okay," I said, forcing my voice to stay even. "That makes sense." Downstairs, my parents moved through their routines, unaware that anything had shifted. My mom poured coffee, chatted about leftovers, asked Amanda about her drive. Amanda answered kindly, graciously, exactly the way a good guest would, not the way someone who had kissed me less than 12 hours ago would. I watched from the counter, feeling strangely untethered, like the ground beneath me had shifted without warning. When it was time for goodbyes, Amanda hugged my mom, thanked her again, promised to visit. My dad shook her hand, firm and approving. Then she turned to me. The hug she gave me was brief, friendly, safe. It felt like a boundary made physical. "Text me when you get home," I said automatically. She nodded. "Of course." And then she was gone. The house felt too quiet after that. I wandered from room to room, straightening things that didn't need straightening, replaying the kiss in fragments I couldn't control. The way her hand had tightened in my hair. The way she'd whispered, "We can't like it," was both a warning and a confession. I told myself I was overthinking it, that Amanda was just doing what she always did, choosing clarity over chaos. Still, the absence settled in my chest like weight. Back in my apartment 2 days later, normal life resumed without asking how I felt about it. Emails piled up, groceries ran low, the world moved on. Amanda texted me about work, about traffic, about nothing important. She didn't mention the weekend, she didn't mention the kiss. I followed her lead, responding carefully, keeping things light. It felt like walking on glass. A week passed, then another. We met for coffee once, neutral territory, midday, public. She looked the same, calm, grounded, untouchable. Conversation flowed easily until it didn't. There was a space between us now, invisible but rigid. When I laughed, she smiled a beat too late. When our hands almost touched, reaching for napkins, she pulled back instinctively. Finally, I couldn't stand it. "Did I do something wrong?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. Amanda held my gaze for a long moment before answering. "No," she said gently. "You didn't do anything wrong." She paused, then added, "That doesn't mean I can keep doing this." "Doing what?" I asked, even though I already knew. "Pretending I don't want more than you're ready to give," she said. There was no accusation in her tone, just truth. I swallowed hard. "I didn't say I wasn't ready. You didn't say you were," she replied. Silence settled between us, heavy and final. I wanted to reach across the table, to take her hand, to promise something I hadn't fully figured out yet. But for the first time, I understood what Amanda was asking of me. Not reassurance, not comfort, a choice. When we parted that day, she hugged me again, brief, careful, unresolved. I watched her walk away, the realization settling slowly and painfully into place. Losing her wasn't a distant fear anymore. It was happening. Quietly, politely, because I hadn't been brave enough to stop it. I didn't realize how much space Amanda had occupied in my life until it was suddenly empty. Not gone, just inaccessible. She still existed on my phone, in my contacts, in the familiar rhythm of occasional messages. But the ease was gone, the unspoken permission, the way I used to assume she'd always be there, no matter how long I took to figure myself out. At night, that absence was louder. I lay awake, replaying moments I'd never examined too closely before. The way she always noticed when I was overwhelmed. How she adjusted her pace to match mine without comment. How she knew when to push and when to wait. I started to see the pattern I'd ignored for years. Amanda had loved me quietly, patiently, without ever demanding more than I could give. And I had let her. I tried dating again, briefly. Coffee with someone I met through friends. A dinner that ended politely, without tension or promise. I smiled, nodded, made the right noises. All the while, my mind kept drifting back to Amanda, to her steadiness, her honesty. The way she never made me feel like I was performing a version of myself. The comparison wasn't fair, it wasn't even close. Work became my refuge. Long hours, full inbox, the comfort of competence. But even there, she followed me. I caught myself reaching for my phone when something good happened, when something hard did too. Each time, I stopped myself. I didn't want to confuse her. I didn't want to reopen a wound I hadn't been brave enough to tend. One evening, while cleaning out a drawer, I found an old photo from college. Amanda and me on a fire escape, wrapped in mismatched blankets, laughing at something I couldn't remember anymore. I stared at it longer than I should have. We looked young, unprotected, like we hadn't learned yet how to hide from our own wants. The realization came quietly, without drama. I wasn't afraid of losing Amanda's friendship. I was afraid of admitting that I'd already lost something much bigger by pretending it wasn't there. That what I felt for her didn't fit neatly into the category I'd assigned her years ago. Best friend. Safe choice. Constant. I thought about my family then, about how easily they'd accepted Amanda. How natural it had felt to be seen with her, claimed by her, without explanation or defense. I'd told myself the relief came from being believed. The truth was harder to swallow. The relief came from being honest. If only by accident. The next time Amanda texted me, it was about something trivial, a work trip, a new coffee place near her office. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. My fingers hovered, then moved with a clarity that surprised me. "Can we talk? Really talk?" The reply didn't come right away. When it did, it was simple. Yes. My heart raced, not with certainty, but with something close to resolve. For the first time since the weekend, I wasn't thinking about how to keep things safe. I was thinking about how to stop lying, especially to myself. Because somewhere between losing her and almost having her, I'd learned the truth I could no longer avoid. If I didn't choose her now, I would spend the rest of my life choosing around her. We met at a small bar halfway between our apartments, the kind of place that stayed quiet even on busy nights. Dim lighting, worn wood, a bartender who didn't ask questions, neutral ground. Amanda was already there when I arrived, sitting at the end of the bar with her coat folded neatly beside her. She looked calm, too calm, the kind of calm that comes from having already accepted an outcome. "Hey," I said, sliding onto the stool next to her. "Hey," she replied, offering a small smile. Polite. Guarded. We ordered drinks we barely touched. Conversation started cautiously. Updates, surface-level things, the safe territory we'd been orbiting for weeks. I let it go on longer than necessary, afraid that if I pushed too soon, she'd shut down. Finally, I took a breath. "I asked you here because I need to understand," I said. "Not what happened that weekend, but us." Amanda stared into her glass for a moment, as if deciding how much truth I could handle. Then she nodded. "Okay," she said softly. "But I'm not doing this halfway." I swallowed. "I don't want halfway." She let out a quiet laugh, not amused, not bitter, just tired. I figured. She turned to face me fully then, her expression open in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. "I fell in love with you a long time ago, Emma. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just gradually. Somewhere between late-night talks and the way you trusted me with the parts of yourself you didn't show anyone else." The words hit me harder than I expected. Not because I hadn't suspected, but because hearing them out loud stripped away every excuse I'd used to avoid them. She continued before I could interrupt. "I never told you because you weren't ready, and because I didn't want to lose you, so I learned how to love you quietly." I felt my throat tighten. "And the weekend?" I asked. "Why agree to that?" Amanda looked down, then back up. "Because I thought maybe this time you might see me differently, and because pretending to be chosen felt better than never being chosen at all." The honesty in her voice left no room to hide. "When you kissed me," she went on, "it wasn't confusing for me. It was confirmation. And that's why I had to step back afterward. I can't unknow what that felt like." I reached for her hand then. Slow, deliberate. This time she didn't pull away. "I didn't realize how much I was protecting myself," I said quietly, "or how much that protection was costing me." Amanda studied my face, searching for something. "I don't need promises," she said. "I need clarity. I can't be your almost." The word landed like a line drawn in ink. "I know," I replied, and for the first time, I meant it. "I'm not asking you to wait. I'm asking you to let me choose, with my eyes open." She held my gaze for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay," she said, "but understand this. Whatever you decide, it has to be real. I won't pretend again." We left the bar separately. No dramatic kiss, no grand gesture, just an understanding that something essential had shifted. As I walked home, the night air sharp against my face, one truth settled clearly in my chest. Amanda hadn't fallen in love with me suddenly. She'd been there all along, and now, for the first time, I was standing exactly where she could see me. Clarity didn't arrive like relief. It arrived like a quiet refusal to keep pretending I didn't already know what I wanted. After our conversation at the bar, the days that followed felt heavier, not with confusion, but with consequence. I moved through my routine distracted, aware that something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't about fear anymore, it was about choice. And for the first time, avoiding one felt worse than making it. I asked Amanda to come over on a Thursday evening, choosing a night with no excuses attached to it. No celebrations, no emotional leverage, just us. When she knocked, I hesitated for a fraction of a second before opening the door, aware of how much rested on what I would do next. She stood there calm and observant, coat buttoned, eyes steady. I took her coat without asking and set it aside like it belonged there. We didn't sit right away. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was expectant. "I don't want to talk around things anymore," I said finally. My voice didn't shake, but my chest felt tight. "I've spent too long protecting myself from something I actually want." Amanda listened without interrupting, her expression open but guarded, like she was prepared for disappointment even as she hoped for something else. "I'm choosing you," I said. Not as a promise for the future, not wrapped in conditions, just truth, placed carefully between us, not pretending, not halfway. The room felt impossibly still. Amanda took a step closer, searching my face like she needed proof that I wouldn't retreat when I didn't. Her hand came up slowly, resting against my jaw, grounding me in the present. "This can't be another almost," she said quietly. "I won't survive that." Her honesty didn't scare me the way it once would have. It clarified. "It won't be," I replied. And for the first time, the words felt aligned with my body, not just my intentions. That was when she leaned in, not rushed, not hesitant. Asking without asking, the kiss was deliberate, unrushed. I felt it everywhere, the familiarity, the recognition, the sense of something long overdue finally landing. I kissed her back without checking myself, without planning my exit. Amanda responded immediately, her body softening into mine, her breath uneven against my lips. This wasn't confusion, it was confirmation. We broke apart only to stay close, foreheads touching, breathing the same air. I felt her hands settle at my waist, steady and present, not pulling, not demanding. The city noise faded into background hum. There was no performance left to maintain, no one to convince. Just the quiet understanding that neither of us was leaving. We moved together without urgency, letting instinct replace fear. Jackets were forgotten, shoes abandoned by the door. Every touch felt intentional, unspoken consent layered into every pause. When Amanda's hand found mine and laced our fingers together, it felt ceremonial in a way that surprised me. Less about desire, more about belonging. Later, the world narrowed to warmth and shared breath. The soft kind of closeness that doesn't ask for validation. Amanda rested against me, her presence solid and unguarded. I traced slow lines along her arm, aware of how natural it felt to be here, to stay. No one had to say what this meant, we both knew. In the quiet that followed, she shifted slightly, her head settling against my shoulder. "You didn't disappear," she murmured. I pressed a kiss to her hair, something steady unfolding in my chest. "I'm still here," I said. And I meant it beyond the moment. For the first time, loving Amanda didn't feel like risk or rebellion. It felt like alignment, like choosing something that had been choosing me all along. Morning arrived without urgency, the light filtering in slowly, as if the day itself understood it didn't need to rush us apart. I woke first, aware of Amanda's presence before I opened my eyes. The warmth at my side, the familiar weight of her arm resting against me like it had always belonged there. For a moment, I stayed still, letting the quiet settle, absorbing the difference between this and every other, almost I'd ever known. When she stirred, it was with a softness that felt earned. No flinching, no distance. She smiled at me in that half-awake way that made my chest tighten, then leaned in to kiss me without thinking. It wasn't tentative, it wasn't searching, it was easy. That simplicity felt like the loudest declaration of all. We moved through the morning together in small, intimate rhythms. Coffee brewed while the city woke up outside, bare feet on cool floors, shared glances that didn't need translation. There was laughter, low and surprised, like we were rediscovering something we'd misplaced, and were relieved to find intact. When Amanda brushed past me in the kitchen, her hand lingered at my back, grounding me in the present. The weight of what came next sat quietly beneath it all. I knew it. She knew it. Choosing each other in private had been the first step. The harder one waited outside these walls. When my phone buzzed with a message from my sister asking if we wanted to come by for dinner, both of you, my heart jumped. I looked at Amanda, uncertainty flickering across my face. She didn't answer for me. She just waited. "Yes," I typed back before I could overthink it. The drive there felt different than any other trip I'd taken to my family's house. Not heavier, clearer. Amanda sat beside me, calm, observant, her hand resting on her thigh. At a red light, I reached over and took it. She turned toward me, searching my face. "You don't have to do this for me," she said gently. "I need you to do it because it's true." I nodded. "It is," I replied. Dinner was ordinary in ways that mattered. The table set, familiar voices overlapping, the comfort of routine. My sister greeted us easily, hugged Amanda like she'd always been part of the picture. My parents asked about work, about plans, about the drive. No one made announcements. No one demanded explanations. The normalcy was disarming. At one point, my sister referred to Amanda as my girlfriend. The word hung there, waiting to be corrected. I felt Amanda's attention shift subtly, not pulling away, not leaning in, just present. I reached for her hand instead, my thumb brushing the back of hers in a quiet affirmation. No one commented. The moment passed. Something inside me settled. After dinner, we stepped outside into the cool evening air. The street was quiet, lit by a single lamp that cast long shadows across the sidewalk. Amanda turned to me, studying my face like she was committing it to memory. "That was real," she said, not surprised, just steady. I nodded. "So are we." I kissed her then, right there on the sidewalk, not quickly, not to make a point, just because it felt like the most honest thing to do. She kissed me back with the same certainty, her hand fitting easily at my waist, her presence unwavering. The world didn't stop. It didn't need to. On the drive home, the silence between us was comfortable, filled with the kind of understanding that comes after something difficult is finally said. Amanda leaned her head against the window, watching the city pass. I felt lighter, not because everything was resolved, but because I'd stopped carrying it alone. Back at my place, we moved through the space differently now, less tentative, more sure. When Amanda kissed me again before we turned in for the night, it felt like punctuation, not a question. The beginning of a rhythm, rather than a single moment. Lying there later, her breathing slow and steady beside me, I understood the shift with unexpected clarity. Loving Amanda hadn't required a dramatic leap. It had required presence, honesty, the courage to let what was true be seen. And for the first time, I wasn't wondering what came next. I was already there. The weeks that followed didn't announce themselves as a new beginning. They unfolded quietly, in the accumulation of ordinary moments that no longer felt provisional. Amanda started leaving a toothbrush at my place without asking. I began buying the coffee she liked without thinking. There was no conversation where we defined timelines or made declarations about forever. We simply kept choosing each other in ways that didn't require witnesses. Mornings became my favorite time. Not because they were dramatic, but because they were easy. We woke at different paces, me slower, her already alert, and met somewhere in the middle. Sometimes she read while I made breakfast. Sometimes we lingered in bed longer than we meant to, the city moving on without us. The intimacy wasn't loud. It was steady. It felt earned. My family adjusted the way families do. Imperfectly. Gradually. My mom asked questions that hovered on the edge of curiosity and concern. My dad stayed quieter, observant. There were moments of awkwardness, pauses where no one quite knew what to say. But there was also effort, invitations addressed to both of us. Conversations that didn't circle back to explanations. Acceptance didn't arrive as a grand gesture. It arrived as consistency. One evening, Amanda and I attended a small gathering with friends from work. Nothing special. A living room, too many coats on the bed, music low enough to talk over. At some point, someone introduced us as a couple without ceremony. Amanda glanced at me, a question in her eyes. I smiled and nodded. She smiled back. That was all it took. There were still hard days, moments when old instincts flared, when I felt the urge to retreat, to smooth things over, to choose what was easier instead of what was honest. The difference now was that I didn't do it alone. When I pulled inward, Amanda noticed. When she hesitated, I stayed present. We were learning how to meet each other without disappearing. One Saturday afternoon, while we were folding laundry together, Amanda looked at me and said, "You know this feels different, right?" I paused, holding one of her sweaters. "How?" I asked. She shrugged, like we're not auditioning anymore. The words landed softly but stayed. I smiled, realizing how true they were. The kiss we shared then was unremarkable in all the ways that mattered. No urgency, no symbolism. Just a quiet punctuation in the middle of the day. It didn't feel like a milestone. It felt like habit forming, like something that would happen again and again, without effort. That night, as we lay side by side, Amanda traced absent patterns on my arm. I waited a long time, she said, not accusing, just stating a fact. I turned toward her, meeting her gaze. I know, I replied. I won't make you wait like that again. She studied me for a moment, then nodded. Trust, offered without drama. Looking back, I understood that pretending had never been the real problem. Fear had been. Fear of wanting something that couldn't be contained. Fear of choosing something that would change me. Loving Amanda didn't make my life smaller or harder. It made it more precise. I had spent years thinking love needed rehearsal, conditions, timing, safety nets. What I learned instead was simpler and harder. Love begins when you stop practicing and start staying, and for the first time, staying felt like home.